The morning felt different, even before we knew why. The Emperor's convoy returned, but something about it felt terribly wrong.
No one dared speak loudly, but everyone was whispering the same story.
Life continued, but trust had already begun to disappear. The Empire still spoke with confidence, but fear had entered every village. The Emperor may have been gone, but the work never stopped.
We had built walls strong enough to challenge the mountains, but no wall could stop time.
That night, no one spoke about the future.
The Empire was moving, but none of us knew where it was heading.
An empire can seem eternal, right until the day it begins to fall.
A new emperor now ruled China, though few of us had ever seen his face. The orders kept coming, but hope did not. The emperor had changed, but the burden on our shoulders had only grown heavier.
Every meal tasted the same, but every conversation carried more fear.
The harvest belonged first to the Empire, and only then to those who had grown it. Even the marketplace had begun to whisper instead of sing. People no longer counted the years. They counted the next bowl of grain.
Some left to build. Others never returned. The stories came from every road, and none of them spoke of peace.
The Empire still looked unbreakable, but the first cracks had already begun to spread. We worked from sunrise to sunset, yet little of the harvest remained ours.
Every season ended the same way, with another cart leaving the village. The village grew quieter each year, not because people stopped talking, but because fewer people remained.
When one project ended, another was already waiting.
Food filled our stomachs, but never erased our exhaustion.
Every departure carried the same unanswered question. The Tani, would they ever return?
The weather changed, but the work never did. The roads carried endless supplies, but never enough hope.
The farther the travelers had come,
the more familiar their stories sounded.
the winter, it took everything this year.
The storm had not yet reached us, but everyone could already see it coming.
The first stories of rebellion arrived long before the rebels themselves.
Ves, they speak of unrest.
Chen Sheng and Wu Guang, they are spreading the word.
The Empire answered every rumor with more soldiers. Soon, the roads carried more families than merchants.
For the first time, people spoke openly about the impossible.
Even ordinary tools began to look different.
Smoke rose from places where peace had lived only days before.
Fear arrived quietly and stayed long after sunset. For the first time in my life, I heard someone say the Qin could be defeated.
That night, I realized we were no longer living through history. We were living through the end of an empire. The roads were no longer filled with traders. They were filled with people running for their lives. No one knew where safety was, only where danger was coming from. Every bridge carried a different story, but every face carried the same fear.
From the hills, I watched the empire unravel, one village at a time.
The silence was louder than any battle. The storm outside was fierce, but the one across the empire was far worse. The fields no longer waited for harvest. They waited for whoever survived.
In times like these, kindness became more valuable than gold. To people like us, every army looked the same.
The empire that had united China was still standing, but its heart was already breaking.
For the first time in my life, my greatest task was no longer building. It was keeping my family alive.
Every step away from home felt heavier than the last.
We stopped only long enough to drink, never long enough to feel safe.
The forest fed us when the empire no longer could. A cave became our home, and a single flame became our comfort.
We belonged to neither army, yet both could change our lives forever. When food became scarce, sharing became our greatest act of courage. Someone else had once called this place home, just as we once called another village ours. As long as the sun still rose, there was still a reason to keep walking. The land between the armies was no longer empty. It was filled with people like us, simply trying to survive.
Some spoke of unmatched strength. Others spoke of unexpected kindness.
The empire no longer held every sword in China.
The battles were far away, but their consequences reached every village. From a distance, every army looked powerful. Up close, every army was made of ordinary people.
Hope survived because people kept giving it new names.
We walked toward tomorrow, without knowing who would rule it. Even in uncertain times, the earth still asked to be planted.
Empires speak of eternity. Farmers speak of the next harvest.
Some men were fighting to rule China, while the rest of us were simply trying to live long enough to see who would.
The capital stood ahead, but it no longer felt like the heart of an empire.
The city had not become silent. It had become empty.
When kingdoms fall, ordinary people are left to gather the pieces. Power had once lived here. Now only its echoes remained.
Even after destruction, people still chose to rebuild.
The river kept flowing, as though history itself refused to stop. The buildings had fallen, but it was certainty that had truly collapsed.
No throne, no matter how magnificent, could hold back time forever.
Empires end, but life quietly begins again.
The city still stood before me, but the empire that built it was already gone.
We believed the wall would protect the empire forever. The stones remained exactly where we left them, but the empire had already disappeared. The land cared little about the names of emperors. It only waited to be planted again.
Beneath that quiet hill, the first emperor still slept, unaware that his dynasty had already become history.
The army we built would wait in silence for more than 2,000 years.
For the first time in many years, we slept without fear.
I had helped build an empire and lived long enough to watch it fall.
Empires change, but the rivers continue to flow.
Stone can outlive kings, but no ruler outlives time.
We believed stone would last forever, and we were right. But we believed emperors would too, and we